Again, good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to the AASHTOWare BrDR 7.6 new features and enhancements webinar. This webinar will be presented by Subhadeep Ghosh and Carolyn Coyce from ProMiles. Thanks for your time, and I'm looking forward to this webinar. Quick housekeeping items down below on your screen. If you're on a computer, there's a Q&A box. If you have any questions along the way, please enter your questions into the Q&A. Someone might get back to you right away on that Q&A box, a typed response, or we could save your question to the end and answer the question verbally towards the end. So just keep an eye on that Q&A box if you do type in a question. Lastly, the webinar is recorded, and we'll post that on our YouTube channel at the end of the webinar. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Subhadeep to get us started.
Thank you, Ben. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for joining, everyone. I am Subhadeep Ghosh, and I'm a technical manager on the team that develops AASHTOWare BrDR at ProMiles. And I think we also have Carolyn Coyce here, as Ben mentioned. One thing to just add on to that, you can see the screen, and you can also see we have our email IDs here. So once the webinar is done, and if you have any further questions, please, you can reach out to us through email as well. And with that, we're going to get started here. So we're going to talk about the new features and enhancement in version 7.6 for AASHTOWare BrDR. So let's go to the next slide. So this is just an overview of this new features that we have in the software. I'm not going to read through the entire list here because we are going to go over the individual items anyway. Let's move over to the first item. So we made some improvements to our installer. We also made some major improvements to our framework, in which AASHTOWare BrDR uses. So from the installer point of view, we made improvements to the features page. We use a new Wix version for the bootstrapper, but the important thing is we switched to a framework called .NET 8 for BrDR, and that is the latest and the greatest framework at that time from Microsoft, and it has resulted in much faster operation and general ease of usability. If you have any license questions, please email us at brdr@promiles.com. But from a user point of view, from the installer point of view, you will probably not see a lot of differences, except better error reporting and the new framework that the installer uses behind the scene. We also have some improvements to the desktop service, the desktop license service. This service was implemented, I believe, for version 7.5, and we already have some improvements done for 7.5.1. We also introduced an auto checkout session option, which so to elaborate on that, the agencies with unlimited license has the ability to use an offline mode. And for that, you can check out your license for 7 days, and you can be offline. You don't have to the license doesn't check in to check the license status, and it can go on for 7 days. But after the 7th day, the license can automatically recheck out itself by it connects back on, and it checks the license status, and then if the license status is good for the next 7 days, then it will auto check out again for the next 7 days, and then again you can work offline for the next 7 days automatically. Rather, you don't have to check out the license again after the 7 days period is over. It also allows import from bridges from select sponsored consultant to consultant unlimited licensees. That's another feature that was added. Moving on from the installation procedures. This is a big upgrade for the framework. Back in the previous versions, we were using .NET Framework. I believe we went up till 4.8, and I don't remember 4.8 or 4.6. But then .NET came out with this more of a platform independent kind of .NET versions where and it's much more suited for code or framework or code portability. So this is the .NET framework was implemented for both the BrDR desktop client and also for the actual software itself, the client version that you install on the on your computer to run analysis. And so that uses a new framework called .NET 8 from BrDR 7.6. We have made some great enhancements to the ARC tool. If you're familiar with the ARC tool, ARC stands for Analysis Results Comparison Tool. The ARC tool was implemented. I mean, this is essentially the version 2.0 of the ARC tool, and as you can see on the GIF on the right hand side, we introduced a ribbon interface where you can. It's much easier to work with. We also created the new concept of having a project. So you can have your own project. Every project has its own database, and then you can also import, export, and merge data sets. It's essentially, you can see the user interface has been improved, and it also improves error reporting in case of running an analysis. If the analysis fails, something happened with your connection to the database or something like that, it will report those kind of errors. Also, we have allowed customization in terms of comparison, dataset comparisons. Now you can run, you can compare between LFR, LRFR. You can have vehicle A in LFR and you can compare with vehicle B in LRFR, things like that. So the comparison portion has been upgraded to do like custom comparisons like that. You can also set up your, also set up multiple folders in your file explorer and then create separate data sets based on this folder structure as you're creating in one window if you call create data sets. That's a nice feature to have if you don't want to click on multiple folders and click and create data sets per folder. Also, the other nice feature is if your bridge is running for a long time and you would like to skip that bridge and move on to the next one, there is an auto analysis timeout feature, which again you can access from the settings window. And then the other nice feature is if you're running thousands of bridges that you may have 8,000 bridges in your database and you want to run all of those 8,000 bridges, it has an auto cleanup feature, which also cleans up the analysis results that gets dumped into the file explorer, so that as you're running the analysis, it pulls the results, saves it to the data sets, but then behind the scene, it also cleans up the file explorer, the windows, or rather the file explorer on Windows, so that you don't run out of space as you're running those bridges. We made some updates for how you access the help. This is to be in the, I think it calls like a backend menu in BrDR. You have to click on the left-hand corner of the Bridge Explorer and access the help. This was moved from the back end menu or the background menu and put it on the ribbon. This ribbon, as you can see here, it's available both for Bridge Explorer as well as Bridge Workspace. And this is just for easy accessibility. You can directly go to the BrDR website. You can open up the help directly. You can directly open up the the support center. You can directly open up the link to the conference articles. And you can directly open up the help for getting the technical notes. And also if you want to assign the engine help as you're looking at the help, you can also click on that directly. But there are some of the greatest resources, also tutorials. You can click on, it's like a one click. If you click here, it'll open up a web page with all those contents that you're looking for. Okay, moving on to some enhancements for LRFD spec updates. So the AASHTO came out with the LRFD spec update for the 10th edition very recently. They published it, and then it was based on all the ballot items that were approved in the year 2021, 2022, and 2023 in the Committee for Bridges and Structures meeting. AASHTO BrDR essentially implemented like 26 agenda items uh, for the program. Let's go over them briefly. So the first one, well, let's talk about reinforced concrete. There were some updates to calculate instantaneous deflection based on effective moment of inertia, based on cracking moment. So as you can see on the table on the right hand side, this was a different equation. Now it's an equation based on whether your factored service moment is less than 2/3 of the cracking moment, or it's more than 2/3 of the cracking moment. Uh, essentially for prismatic sections, it gets the moment of inertia from the midspan. For non-prismatic section, it gets an average of the critical positive and critical negative moment sections. And then and it's based on the service moment. There's also an implementation for considering time-dependent deflection for creep and shrinkage for reinforced concrete. It's essentially based on a lambda delta factor times the immediate deflection being the deflection due to sustained loads for reinforced concrete section. Also, there were some updates for nominal weight or normal weight and lightweight concrete from section 5.1. Let's move on to the next update for reinforced concrete. There were updates for introducing hoops, especially for like shear reinforcement in compression members. This applies mainly for columns. On the right hand side, you can see a screenshot for column shear reinforcement window where you have the option to indicate a hoop bar or a hoop bar or a hoops bar with lap splice. Essentially what this does is the input is the same between hoops and hoops with lap splice, but from the spec checking or a design point of view, it uses different equations. So that's why we have these two inputs available. There were a bunch of changes for reinforcement development length calculations as well. There was an increase in applicable limit for bar size from number 11 to number 18 for unless otherwise specified in a specific reinforcement development calculations spec section. And then there was some so I think for hook bars there were some limitations for concrete for lightweight concrete, which was removed for hook bar intention. Also, there were some consideration or there was some inclusion for considering the bar hook radius while calculating development length for hook bars. And so as I was saying, like the limit for the bar size was removed for number 11 bars. It was increased to number 18 bars. But that I think applies to only straight bars type, the hook bars, as well as the new headed deform bars consideration. I think that one, the limit is still up till number 11 bars. So a new section was also added for headed deform bars for consideration in the LRFD specification. So essentially on the right hand side, you can see the input for straight bars. You can indicate whether your bars are head at start and head at end. Essentially that would change your the development and calculations to consider the headed, it will depend on whether if you don't have head at the start, then it would use a straight bar equation. If you don't have head at the start, it would use the headed deform bars equations. Also, as I was saying, for hook bars, you have the option to enter the start and the end hook diameter for consideration in the development and calculations at the start and the end of the bar. Also, there is in the rebar window, in the rebar materials window, there is an option to, I think previously we had epoxy coated option. Now we have zinc and epoxy dual coated option as well to be considered for development length calculation. Okay, let's moving on to pre-stress concrete. We were talking about instantaneous deflection for reinforced concrete. Pre-stress concrete also has changes related to instantaneous deflection. If the tensile stress limit is not satisfied, and then it uses the same same table that we showed for reinforced concrete for pre-stressed concrete as well. Also, there were some changes for reinforced concrete tensile stress. Essentially, this stress limit was to consider the bars that are on the compression side if certain criteria are satisfied for computing the tensile stress in concrete. There were some updates for beam continuity as well, for continuous pre-stressed beam, simple for dead load, or simple for stage 1, continuous for stage 2, and live load. An additional checkbox has been introduced, as you can see on the right, to allow cracking at girder ends. If allow cracking at girder ends is checked for bottom flange at the transition with diaphragms, then the required area of steel is checked against the restraining moment. And essentially, the goal here is to limit the stress in steel to be less than or equal to 36 KSI. There has been an additional check added for horizontal transfer tie reinforcement. As you can see on the right-hand side here, this has been a bearing detail section, or a bearing detail section has been added to the beam details window for pre-stressed concrete girders. Especially this is applicable to continuous pre-stressed concrete girders, where if you have a steel plate bearing embedded with shear studs are provided at girder ends, then this check is not done. But one thing to note here is that the input for tie reinforcement is not available in BrDR. So this check essentially will tell you the requirement area or requirement for tie reinforcement based on your input in this window, and it will not do a check against an input since the input is not available in BrDR right now. Another thing to note here is all these changes for pre-stressed concrete were also implemented for the pre-stress design tool that came in with the version 7.6. Okay, let's move on to steel changes. So there were a bunch of updates for cross frames, cross-frame diaphragms. So the NCHRP 12-113 report were recommendations were implemented for considering axial rigidity reduction for non-composite and composite model. As you can see on the right-hand side here, in your diaphragm definition window, you can enter the axial rigidity reduction factor or axial rigidity coefficients. One thing to note here is that these coefficients in the specs were recommended for T and angle section, but based on the implementation, if the section is not a T and angle section, but you have entered the axial rigidity coefficient, it will get used in the analysis as well. There were new stability check requirements added for cross frames, and then excuse me, you can also indicate if your excuse me. You can also indicate if your X-frame diaphragm, or type 1 as we show it here, is a tension only diagonal system, or so the stability check was based on the AISC specification for non-composite DC load and construction loads, mainly for skewed I-girder bridges with discontinuous cross frames. There were a lot of changes. Implemented for steel lateral torsional buckling. So from the previous implementation to the current implementation, the previous implementation for non-prismatic section, it would look at a critical section where your compressive resistance is the lowest, but now the controlling location is based on maximum of this FPU over RH RB FYC, and then for Appendix A6 it's MU over RPC over MYC. So in the previous it was based on, there was requirement for CB, and then there were some requirement for I'm sorry, there was some requirement for prismatic section, and there were some requirement for non-prismatic section. In this spec update, the implementation was there's a separate article for prismatic section where you compute CB based on quarter point moments. And then this quarter point moment equation came from AISC. And then there were some new provisions included for non-prismatic section that uses this elastic LTB load ratio, which gets computed in Appendix D6.6. There are a couple of methods to implement or to compute the elastic LTB load ratio. There is method A and method B. So on the right-hand side, you can see control options were introduced for both LRFD and LRFR. You can either select method A or method B, and these methods will be used for computing the elastic LTB load ratio when you're considering a non-prismatic section. Some other 10th editions updates related to splice. There was an update to consider the bolt thread included for shear plane in transition length of bolts. So a checkbox was added for the splice window here. So essentially, this checkbox can override the option that is selected for the bolt definition specifically. So you may have a bolt definition that you're using for, cover plates as well as in splice, but for splice, you want the bolt definition to behave differently for considering shear. And in that scenario, you can check this box for specific to splice. There was also a spec update for considering longitudinal reinforcement for flange splice moment resistance at composite negative flexure. A control option, or rather a checkbox, was added for the splice window here to consider longitudinal reinforcement for negative moment capacity. There were some other requirements too based on to consider that, but essentially, if you would like to consider the longitudinal reinforcement in the negative moment capacity, you can check this box here to do that. Moving on to some miscellaneous updates for steel. There were some updates for considering for creep factor for slip critical bolts. There were some updates for I and H shape members for considering flexural resistance in the on the weak axis based on the section F6 of AISC manual. There were some updates for considering pitch of stitch bolts for built-up eye girders. Shear connector clusters were introduced, and they're on the I don't have the screenshots here because of lack of space, but for shear connector you can now define shear connector in a cluster of 3 or 4, and then. But one thing to note here is that we do have a shear stud design tool. The shear stud design tool does not design for clusters. It only designs for the ranges, the original, the previous, or the ranges method of entering shear connectors. Also, support for adding channel studs has been removed from the 10th edition. So there will be no evaluation for channel studs in 10th edition. Also, there were some changes for fatigue and nominal shear resistance related to shear studs. There was an update for especially for straight eye girder bridges, not to have compact steel sections, which should not have bolt holes in tension flanges. There were also updates for flexure resistance for T's and double angles in the spec update. Also, a new bolt type was introduced. This ASTM F3148 bolt was introduced as well, which was added to the library to be used in version 7.6. So that's all about steel updates. Let's move on to some culvert updates. There was a change in an equation for the moment due to live load for structural plate box. This computes the factored live load moment. So there was this equation was simplified, and there were a bunch of updates for reinforced concrete culvert live load. These updates essentially came from the MBE update for the 2022 interim and LRFR, and those updates were carried over to the LRFD spec now. So essentially the live load based on worst case area from a couple of 3612.6a and 42610. And also, like I said, I mean, these were already updated for the LRFR spec. They were also implemented for the LRFD spec now. Also, the option to ignore live load or negligible live load based on the live load pressure less than 10% of the vertical load pressure on the crown and the live load pressure, or the sum of the vertical load pressure and the live load pressure. One thing to note is that the criteria for live load to ignore the live load was different in the previous spec version. So in the new spec version, it says since we have a control option which is unchecked by default, for scenarios which may have ignored the live load in the previous spec may not ignore the live load for the new spec unless you check this box here, and this criteria is satisfied for the live load pressure less than 10% of the sum of the vertical load pressure and the live load pressure. Also, similar to LRFR spec, MBE spec, the approaching wheel load was introduced, which replaced the live load surcharge for culverts. Okay, with that, I will hand over to Carolyn Coyce. Carolyn, do you want to share your screen?
Yes.
You can just start sharing.
Yeah, just 1 second here. All right. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Sorry, technical issue here. But yeah, you can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Coyce. I'm technical manager with ProMals. Like Shubhadeep went over, a lot of the big changes for the 7.6 version were related to the 10th edition LRFD spec updates. There were also some changes implemented for the MBE specification updates. There were really mainly two things from the 2024 interims, but before we get into that, I just wanted to kind of clarify a little bit about some of the different interim versions here. So every year, the AASHTO Committee on Bridges and Structures, the COBS committee, approves a new set of ballot items. So for the 2022 approved ballot items were implemented in AASHTOWare version 7.5. And so when you look in the software that, you would see that's the 2023 interim update. For the 2023 ballot items are implemented now in 7.6. And so when you see in the software, when you're going to set the spec edition, you'll see that as the 2024 interim update. Now, as far as the actual publication of the interim MBE specifications, all of these interim spec updates from the 2022, 2023, and 2024 ballot items are going to be published as the 2025 MBE interim updates. Those will be published this year. Some states and users have worked with ballot items and, are able to, use these features in the software. So, we also have, you can see here on the AASHTOWare BrDR.org website, you can also go here to technical notes. And if you refer to technical note 80, that'll provide a little bit more information just about the different versions of interim spec updates. So one of the two main things from the 2024 interim revisions is some changes to permit vehicle analysis. So this interim revision adds notional permit vehicles for analysis. Prior to that, it was just the actual permit vehicle. So notional vehicles are added to the specifications now and are supported in the software as a version 7.6. There are also some changes to analysis configurations for permit vehicles relating to the ADTT of the structure and the application of the lane load to basically, model that other traffic that's there with the permit vehicle. So this was added in 7.6 for those updates. The other main change with the MBE 2024 interim updates was the addition of two new analysis methods for gusset plate compressive resistance. Prior to 7.6, the method that was in the software was that's been used, just up until now, was the Whitmore section and partial shear compression check. So this in 7.6, this this type of analysis essentially behaves the same as it did prior to 7.6. There's nothing about either of those analysis checks that changes, with the exception that the partial shear equations are moved to the compression section where it talks about compression in the MBE, since partial shear is really considered a compression check. So aside from the equation reference, there's no change to the way that that's analyzed. This is also the default compression method. So if you have bridges that you've migrated from previous versions up through 7.6, it'll just continue to use this compressive resistance analysis method, unless you decide that you want to use one of the other methods here that's provided as an alternate method. Whitmore section and partial shear tends to be on the conservative side in some cases, and so that's why these other methods are kind of introduced here to give people some options for specific configurations where you can get a little bit more of a precise analysis, and you might be able to get a little bit of a better rating. It is important, though, to make sure that the geometry of that truss and gusset plate is actually appropriate for these additional compression methods. So this one here is for a truncated Whitmore section. And then the second method that's introduced is the basic corner check method. So both of these methods can provide a little bit more of a precise evaluation of the compressive capacity, but there are parameters of applicability for these. And so, it is important to just make sure to review the specifications and the information and make sure that these methods are actually appropriate for that structure. So one other thing actually, just to mention about this as well. So when you're looking at the gusset plate compressive analysis, as well as just, with a lot of things in BRR, there is the F1 help menu. So Shubhadeep had mentioned earlier that we added the dedicated help ribbon, which I think we've heard from a lot of people is great, because there's a lot of information there with methods of solution and information that people didn't necessarily know was in the software. But I want to just mention as well that the F1 help menu still is there for the software. So any window that you're entering information, you click that F1 key on your keyboard and it'll pop up a window that'll tell you more about what it's actually looking for those parameters. So whether, particularly with this gusset plate stuff, but with a lot of other things, F1 help, and then methods of solution. And then again, with the gusset plate compression, it's also, important to make sure to review the actual AASHTO specifications and make sure that the analysis method that you're choosing is the right one for your structure. All right, so those are the changes for the MBE spec updates. This next group of new features and enhancements that was added in 7.6 are items that were voted on by the user group to add to the software. So, every year at the annual user group meeting, member agencies vote on items that they would like to add or things that they'd like to change or improve with the software. So these next few items come from there. So this first one is basically prior to 7.6, when you run the load rating tool, which is used basically for a very quick expedited analysis using pre-computed data for permit loading, the rating tool would iterate through the different pass conditions. So you would set your pass conditions for basically no restrictions or conditional approval. So let's say speed restrictions, or, for the vehicle to be escorted and all the other vehicles off the bridge, things like that. And so you can set different pass conditions with restrictions. So the request here was, and what the rating tool does is basically it tries the least restrictive and then iterates until it, comes to a conclusion on, under what conditions the truck can pass. this checkbox allows you to tell it to basically evaluate all of those scenarios so that you can see all of those options for that. This next enhancement was to persist print settings. So there are quite a few places within the software where there is different types of output that people need to put into reports, print out for different reasons. This enhancement was to persist and save print settings once you've set them up for a number of these different windows and types of output locations. There are additionally, we have a couple of exclusions there, which is the report tool 1.0, which is we're currently working on report tool 2.0. So we're going to see, you're all going to see, a lot more stuff to come with that, and a lot of good things there to come. But so that's, why that's not included, since that'll be covered under report tool 2.0. All right, so this next enhancement was to automatically calculate effective flange width. So prior to 7.6 in the deck profile window, this needed to be entered by the user. So this enhancement was to have the program automatically compute it if that value is not entered. So it will now compute this value based on the information you've entered for your girder system, and it'll produce a report here in the output folder that you can view to see how it was computed. Again, this is only available for system models just because for line models, there's not enough information to compute that value. But this is available now for system models as of version 7.6. All right, so this next one is bottom flange lateral supports. So this one was user requested and voted highly in previous Radbug meeting. So this allows you to basically define specific bottom flange lateral support locations, which is really important for certain structure configurations where you have framing plans with different things. So this is enabled for floor beams as well as girders and stringers. So this allows the user to set those points discretely. And this is in the lateral support window or bracing ranges window, depending on the member type that you are setting up. All right, so the next enhancement that we have here is the addition of other types of bent reinforcement bars for reinforced concrete culverts. So in previous versions, you could define bent reinforcement bars, but they only could be positioned in the culvert for negative moment. So basically they would be, just because that was, a common configuration to use those over a culvert wall. So this enhancement adds in bent reinforcement bars that you can also assign for positive moment for culvert top and bottom slabs, and then you can also define it and assign those for wall bars. In addition to adding these bars in, we also made some improvements to the reinforcement schematic. So when you go to the reinforcement window and right click and click view schematic, you'll be able to more easily see and more accurately see bent bars and their locations, which can be helpful in ensuring that the input is as intended. So that improvement was made along with this as well. And then additionally, we added the ability to put the slope for the bent bars at slopes other than 1-to-1. Previously, it was treated as a 1-to-1 slope for all bent bars. So this will give users a little bit more flexibility or ability to model some different configurations here. And again, with all of these new features, anytime you're kind of working through a new feature in BRR, definitely want to use that F1 help menu button. That'll give you more information about kind of exactly what it's looking for in some of those input fields. And then also, review the methods of solution as well, just to get familiar with all the new features. So the next one that we have here is cover plate development length. So this is now enabled for both schedule-based and cross-section based girders. So this just allows the user to enter the development length for cover plates. It assumes that the cover plate will, develop linearly over the course of the development length that's entered. And you can also enter like a % developed at start, to account for different types of configurations and connections that you may have. All right, so these next couple of enhancements were also added to the software. These are not user group requests, but were added into the software. So so we have these tags or technical advisory committees that we work with, and there was discussion about using this alternate C sub B that basically is referenced in the AASHTO commentary, and it kind of refers back to the AISC specifications for kind of particular situations here. This is a fairly specific, I guess, use case. So this control option is turned off by default. It's there if you want to use it. If you do want to use it, definitely take a look at the commentary and associated material, make sure that it's right for that structure. But basically this relates to sections with like compact web sections in contraflexure where one flange is continuously braced. So this basically just gives the user the option to use this if you determine that it is appropriate for your structure. All right. So now we have this other enhancement here. So this was to add points of interest for the webs, specifically for multi-cell box. We've recently, in I think it was 7.5 recent versions, added a lot of new features with multi-cell box, and so this helps to just provide additional ability to specify points of interest, particularly for individual webs. All right, so I think that covers most of the enhancements. Like we said, since there were since the LRFD 10th edition, included quite a lot of specification changes. That was that was sort of the bulk of the change for 7.6, as well as those other enhancements that we talked about. We also have a handful of maintenance items and other bug fixes and resolved incidents that were done in this version. It's kind of too much to, I guess, list or go into detail on all of them here. One thing you can, whenever you install, if you basically go to the drive where you install your program files, you can find this release notes file that gets installed with the software. And this will provide you with a complete list of bugs that were fixed, other things that were changed and added into the software. So, it's always good to review this and make sure that you, can see all the differences between this and, previous versions you may have worked with. Let's see. So maintenance items, bug fixes. We did also remove the Madero engine and associated references. A few versions back, I think it was like 7.3, 7.2, 7.3. We added the AASHTO Timber engine, so that basically replaces the Madero engine. All right. So after we released 7.6, we heard from a couple of states on some things that needed to be addressed with it. So yesterday we released the 7.6 version 7.6.1 maintenance update. So this should be available to download and install now. So this update addresses one maintenance issue, 6 bugs that were classified as urgent or critical, and then 30 additional release bugs. This update does not require a database migration, so you can just basically download this update and install it, and it'll just address these issues without the need for database migration. And then again, when you do that, this also will have release notes that is available when you do this install, so you can from there review the issues that were addressed in this update. Basically, it'll list the BSSD number and the description of the change that was made. All right, so that pretty much covers the 7.6 changes. Again, there's a lot that we covered there. But again, you can always find more information in release notes on the AASHTOWare website. You can find more information there. And then as well, review the methods of solution, because we do, update those to reflect the changes that we make in the software. So that covers, I think, the new things for 7.6. So upcoming in 7.7 and 7.8. So 7.7 currently is planned for release later this year. This is going to support the BrDR BRM data exchange for the new SNIBI. And then it also will update for Section 508 accessibility compliance, and will include the MBE 2025 interim revisions. So that is the 2024 approved valid items. So those will be added in 7.7. And then 7.8 right now is targeted for the middle of next year. That will include reinforced concrete pier cap, LRFR load rating, next generation of report tool. And then it's basically going to be kind of still early phases, but the AASHTO finite element engine for the non-linear soil culvert interaction. So that's kind of a more refined soil structure interaction that's going to be introduced over a few phases, but there's the next phase of that planned for 7.8. And then we'll also planning some analysis engine output data management improvements. So with all that said, we want to point out registration is open for the 2025 AASHTOWare Rating and Design User Group Meeting, otherwise known as RADBUG. This year is going to be in Boise, Idaho, August 12th through 13th. It's a really great conference. It's a great chance to meet and talk with load rating engineers from around the country. There's always a lot of really good different presentations from states and users on a lot of interesting technical stuff. We also have like breakout sessions for fundamentals training and training on the new features in the software. So it's a really great conference, and if you're interested, definitely suggest checking it out, and we hope to see you there. So that registration is open now.
Just to point out, I did put the link to register in the chat. So if you go down to the chat feature of the webinar, you'll see a chat, and I've sent a link to the registration website so you can look at more info.
Ben, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, but Ben, the audio is, I think, real quiet here. I think Ben was saying, yeah. Yeah, I think we may be having some audio issues here. I think what Ben was saying, so yeah, so the registration link is in the meeting chat here for the 2025 AASHTOWare RADBUG meeting. Sorry, I don't know. I think the audio is a little messed up here. I don't know if Ben, if you had anything else you wanted to add on this one, but.
Hope you can hear me now.
Oh, yeah.
But that was what I wanted to point out, is the link to the registration website is in the chat functionality. So you're good to move along.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. So yeah, I think the last kind of thing we have here, so like we said, the 10th edition LRFD bridge specifications is available now. The 2025 MBE is planned to be available later this year, but the 10th edition is available now. And again, it is, so important to actually have these specifications as, working with the software. The software does a lot of analysis based on these specifications, so super important. And AASHTO has provided a discount code for participants in this webinar here. So I think we'll leave this up on the screen if you want to get the discount code. And then I think, Ben, if you had anything that you wanted to add on this or anything else, I guess please feel free to do that. And then maybe we can, take some questions.
Sure. Yeah, please feel free when you're ordering your specifications this year to use that discount code for the new bridge specs. Going over some questions, we do have a couple of questions floating around in the Q&A. The first one, are truncated Whitmore section and basic corner check method considered as valid alternatives to improve rating?
Sure. Yeah, so these are considered valid methods. These are introduced in the commentary. It is important though to make sure that the structure that you're using those methods for, fits within the parameters and the limitations on when those methods are valid. So there's kind of a lot to cover on that. We couldn't really, that's kind of a little bit too much to try to get into slides in the presentation, but I would really strongly recommend, when you do have access to that interim revision on the specifications to read through that and look through the commentary, because that provides a lot of information on under what conditions and circumstances those checks can be used. So let's see. So that would, I think, be the first thing to look at. Those checks were developed. Some of the work leading up to this was done a good few years ago, which Jenny did the Gusset Plate Evaluation Guide that was used sort of as part of the sort of reference material and looking at adding these checks to the specifications. But yeah, the short answer is that, they are valid checks, but it's also really important for the user to make sure that they're actually appropriate for that configuration.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. I'm going to answer one question here. I'm going to ask if we're providing a handout of the presentation. Yes, the presentation is recorded, and anyone who attended the presentation webinar today will get a link to view the recording. Next question. I'm not entirely sure which changes, which section this was for, but how are these changes going to be implemented in the rating portion of BRR? I'm not sure if we were talking about the last ones or that we went over or before that, but
I think I can answer that. I mean, in general, like if there is a design portion of the code that would compute the capacity using the LRFD spec, then that will still be using the LRFD spec with the new spec updates. So the rating, so essentially the latest MBE, whatever latest MBE we have in the version 7.6 will be using the latest LRFD spec from the 10th edition. So
thank you, Subhadeep.
yep, no problem.
If defining a bolted field slice location in the model, will it trigger the 10th edition applicability check for a compact steel section for the non-permitted bolt hole in the tension flange in section 610.6.2.2?
It should. It should.
Gotcha, thank you. Will 7.8 be capable of analyzing flexible culvert type structures with less than 2 feet of fill?
I Ben, I think I could answer that one or try to answer that one. We are still in the process of developing the criteria for the SSI culvert. So potentially, yes, we could handle that, but we have not developed the specs for that yet.
And Mark, just add on to that, it will not be available in 7.8. What's going to be put into 7.8 won't be actually visible to the end user because it's just the soil finite elements to our finite element engine.
7.7 is going to have the engine, but I thought 7.8 we were going to have the windows and things available, the user to be able to use the engine. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I have the versions wrong.
I think that's 7.9 now.
Oh yeah, because we added 7.7, so that shifted everything up a version. But yeah, and I apologize if when I had mentioned that for 7.8, if I had created any confusion there. This is a really big enhancement, and so it's being rolled out over the course of several different versions. Like Mark said, the first steps is to actually get those elements in the engine, and then over a couple of other versions, there will be like more and more capabilities added. So.
All right, thank you. One last question, but I will answer that. Someone wrote, will a PDH certificate be provided for today? Not for today. These were updates that I can only do PDHs for training type, engineering type content. This is more of a update on updates to the software and what it's going to cover. So I can't do that. And I really appreciate everybody's attention and for coming to this webinar. I do have a quick feedback survey that I'm going to launch. And if you have a couple minutes before we end the webinar, you could answer a couple of these questions. That would really help me out. If you're still looking at the slides, don't forget to write down that promo code for the bridge specifications for the next time you go order your specs. Again, thank you so much. I'll leave the poll open for a minute here. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you for the next webinar. Thank you to Carolyn and Subhadeep for a great job presenting. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.